with this episode, like what I want to try to achieve is like for people who may have experiences like myself or like yours or whatever the spectrum looks like, to try to start identifying it internally more. And I think that would just be
Hmm.
helpful. And then secondly, like taking action on that, whether you have your own coping mechanisms or sharing or having conversations with others. Welcome to the Allegedly podcast with your hosts, Katie and Dakota.
Hi there.
So how are you doing, Katie girl?
I'm doing all right. Had a rough night last night, but I'm doing okay. How are you?
I feel blessed. Pretty solid.
Um, yeah, so I think that like my rough night kind of almost like is a good tie-in to the topic for today. So today, for those listening, we're going to be talking a little bit about mental health, and I think specifically like kind of what's going on with like the pandemic. And I feel like everyone's kind of, in quarantine, and folks are, maybe experiencing some different emotions. And I have been very open that like I've struggled with depression and anxiety for, 10 plus years. So I think like it's a topic I'm super passionate about. And yeah, I mean, just kind of wanted to like talk about it. And I know like for Dak, like you haven't, really expanded a whole lot on like
For sure.
yourself. So kind of like break that down. But
Yeah, I
um,
think I think everyone is just kind of like there's a lot happening, there's a lot of change, and I think a lot of things that bring people typically out of those moments, it's a lot more difficult to achieve that now with the pandemic and like social distancing and things like that. Um,
yep.
so I think it's an important topic. I think it's just become more relevant because we're now addressing it as like a part of our like scope of health. But I think even more so this year, just like there's people that are experiencing a lot of like pain in new ways, and I think it's always good for us to have like a conversation about
Mm-hmm.
stuff that affects people and how it affects us and bring air to it in a sense.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. I think for me, like, I maybe, I mean, I'm not like the extremist of extreme by any means. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, like, I am just like the most depressed person on the planet, because I'm definitely not. But like, I've definitely had some like super, dark times and been like very open about it. But I think that when I think about like the pandemic and kind of what's going on in the world right now and being isolated, I feel like, and I've had this conversation with some people, like it's kind of weird to say, but the people who have struggled with mental health issues for a long time and like, go to therapy or have a psychiatrist or like whatever that may look like for them, those people are almost like in a better position, I feel like, at this point, because they've at least gone through and learned coping mechanisms and you know what I mean, like kind of what to
Mm-hmm.
do. Whereas people, like there's a ton of people, that are experiencing this for the first time. Like I feel like it would be wrong to like have an opinion that like no one's depressed right now and no one's experiencing it for the first time right now. Like people are
Mm-hmm.
secluded, so I think just kind of like talking about like what we're going through right now, and then kind of just showing like it doesn't, the levels of your depression or whatever don't kind of like define you almost, you
Yep,
know what I mean?
100% agree. Yeah, totally.
So I mean, I can kind of like give like a brief run through of like last night and like what was
Yeah.
going on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is, of interest to anyone, but like um, every few months, I essentially like have an anxiety attack that happen like that lasts for a couple of hours, I would say. And like I basically like get to the point where I feel like someone's like watching me or someone's following me, and I could be like completely alone in like an apartment, you know what I mean, or something like
Yeah.
that, where I know that like I am most likely alone. But like it freaks me out and like brings me so much anxiety to the point, like for last night, for example, I've been house sitting for the last few weeks, and last night I literally had to drive to my parents' house because I was just like, I can't be alone here. Like, and I mean, I'm in a very, very safe place. Like, it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm in this sketchy place and like, you never know, you know what I mean? I'm in a very secure condo, but it's like, I was just at this point where like, you know, I was checking cupboards, checking showers, checking everything.
Is there something that typically triggers that, or how does that normally occur?
It just like, honestly, like it comes up randomly. I think like it started when I lived in my townhouse, and I think there it was a little more understandable than a place like here. Like when it came yesterday, I was shocked, to be quite honest, because like in the townhouse, it's like I had 3 stories. So you could hear something, and maybe it's just like a random creak from like the air conditioning, or you know what I mean? Like you never know. But since there was people like wall to wall too, it could be like they're downstairs, and it's like I never really knew what was in my place and what wasn't. And so it just would like really trigger me and freak me out. I would literally walk around my place with like a lamp ready to like whack a bitch. But yeah, I mean, like yesterday it just like kind of came up randomly, and I was just sitting here reading actually, and then I couldn't get it out of my mind. Usually in circumstances where I am having an anxiety attack, I will, you know, do like a breathing or like a meditation of some sort. And I was doing like everything, and it just like wouldn't stop. So I don't know.
You know what's
like
interesting about that is like I don't think I've ever experienced that with, I mean, not to that level with like living in an apartment or, you know, any type of situation like that. But that is honestly like one thing that like I almost fear doing, like what I'm about to do. And like, because I think when I'm in the van or I'm parked somewhere, because I'm going to be at like Walmart's at times, or I'm going to be at the side of a street in a town that I'm not necessarily sure of. And I know for a fact I'm going to hear a lot of people walking around and things like that, to where like I almost am like, I hope that I don't overwhelm myself with the unknown of like who's on the other side of the stupid van. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the reason why, like, when I say like I couldn't do it, like obviously part of it is just like living in a van, but like the like deeper side, I feel like is just like I do get this like severe anxiety where like I just can't calm down. And it's like once I got to my parents' house, like I saw my mom and I just broke down crying, and I mean, like, and it sucks, and you start to kind of like feel like you're literally like psycho, you know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, I'm not like, I don't have like an extreme mental illness.
Well, it's
like,
almost like
literally
you acknowledge that no one is there, you know?
Yep.
And I mean, like, obviously it happens, and like there's that slim chance that like something bad could happen to you, because like that's what we see happening in the news, or, you know, at somewhere in the world. But like I think that you acknowledge that no one's there and that you are alone, but it's more of that like mental wave that it just takes over you, you know?
Yeah.
And
well, it's just like
it's difficult at times to be at peace with.
Yeah, for me it's like the nerve feeling, but then like almost like a voice inside my head, like that will almost like, it's hard and weird to explain, but like, for example, I was taking the trash out, and like I just kept hearing, like repeating in my head, like get out, get out, get out, get out, get out. And I was like, and it like hypes you up and like freaks you the heck out. So I don't know, like, so that was kind of what was going on yesterday, and that's by no means like a common occurrence, luckily, on a daily basis, like dealing with my depression. And I feel like sometimes like some social anxiety more, or like anxiety about work specifically. But the like extreme, like, oh my God, someone's following me, someone's watching me, that kind of thing, like the last time I experienced it was when I noticed that like stalker that I had, but um I mean, that's understandable. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, but like I said, that's just one like random mini experience, and since it was fresh in my mind from yesterday, I thought I would kind of share. But I think that something that you and I have talked a little bit about, the people, like I touched on it a little bit, but the people who are experiencing this for the first time, or the people who are in a position where like they see someone like me who's talking about like the extremes, right? And then they're like, oh, okay, maybe I don't have depression, or maybe I don't have anxiety because it's not like to that point. And I think like the whole point of having this conversation is more, no, you probably do have it.
Yeah, I
And
think, well, it's important though, like what the way that I see it is it's important to talk about it, and for us just to kind of like identify what we experience, because I think at the periods of times before we identified mental health as something that is in our scope of health and like well-being, no one really talked about it. No one really said, that this is like an issue in the same way that like
yeah,
you're sick or you break your arm or things like that. And I think just normalizing it makes it exist in a
yeah.
more factual way, I guess you could say, or I don't know what word I'm trying to search for, but
No, so I mean, like, I think that it kind of ties into a few weeks ago, I did some like mental health polls on Twitter. Um, and the first question I asked was, have you been diagnosed with anxiety or depression? So keep in mind, like, this means like they have medically been told you have this, right? So like some of the people who voted no could have it and they just haven't, opened up about it. There was 51 people voted and 30 people, 59%, said they had, which is pretty crazy in my opinion. I mean, like, it doesn't shock me, just because like I think we all have like our shit that we're kind of dealing with. But I think especially when you look at like social media these days, and like everyone obviously is putting like their best foot forward, for the most part, like we don't really touch on these things. You know what I mean? So it's like you see someone like me maybe who, while like I do try to incorporate and make sure that I am talking about like my struggles, but like that's not every day, right? So like
right.
if you're new to following me and it's not when I'm like in the middle of, one of my rants, basically, like what you're seeing is like this, I don't want to say fake life, but like I'm putting like the best highlights forward. You know what I mean? Like if my social media was all like, oh, I'm freaking depressed, like I don't think anyone would want to like, engage with that kind of stuff all the time, because it can get draining. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think, social media in general too is almost just like a memory book, or even like a diaries at times. And like sometimes you share the good things, sometimes you share the bad things, and like It's just the way it is. And if it's a diary you're sharing with the world, then like it's probably going to be mostly good. That being said, like when it comes to like your depression and kind of like the ups and downs, the way that I perceive it is everyone kind of has it, and you have higher days and lower days, and like more aggressive like deep depression days. And when it like combining that with social media and sharing some of our stronger moments, you see Katie's strong moment, and then the next day you see Dakota's strong moment, and then the next day you see like Bob the Builder's moment. You know what I mean? So like it just seems like positive, 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 positive. And then when you're on that roller coaster and you have your ups and your downs, you get almost like psychologically confused. It's just like, well, shit, everyone's having a great time all the time. And, but in reality, you took a break for a second because you were dealing with this, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is this like known thing, but like psychologically, it just kind of affects you.
You kind of like forget almost. You know what I mean?
Because I think we all identify that social media is typically our highlight reel,
Totally.
Like,
yeah.
No one's taking selfies like near the double chin area. You know what I mean? Like we're all up
Right.
high with the light above us as well.
Totally.
So
Yeah,
like
yeah,
we
you're
identify the highlight reel, but like it also still affects us regardless. And
yeah.
it's
Yeah, no,
common
and
and
I I think it's a good point, and it's good to just kind of like remember for when like you are feeling low and you're scrolling through social media, because I mean, like you calling that out, it's like I do that all the time. Like
right.
I'll be like, why is everyone so happy and I'm so freaking depressed? And I'm
Mm,
like, and it maybe it's just like an extremely off day, you know what I mean? Because like I said, like I cope pretty well. I feel
mm-hmm.
like with the like things that I am going through, but like it's taken a lot of time and work to be able to
Mm-hmm.
do that. Like it's not just overnight, like I pop into one therapist. Like I've gone through so many therapists, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
um, until I kind of like learned enough tools to where like I'm not seeing someone right now. I probably should be, but maybe I will soon.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, that's
You know
just
what I
part of your
mean?
journey, you know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think, I guess
So
just
what
to
if
like,
I was
you're
gonna
gonna,
say, so like what about you? Like,
yeah.
do you wanna like pop in there with like your kind of
Yeah, I think for
experience?
me, in the same way that like culture and society has like perceived and discussed mental health, I think like I've kind of moved in that same at that same pace, despite feeling some type of way, you know, throughout my
Mm-hmm.
life. I think for me, I wouldn't say that I've had anything like aggressive, you know what I mean? Like I've definitely
Right.
had some moments where like I felt very, very low. And
Yeah.
the way that like I've communicated it to you and to other friends who just like I at times discuss like kind of where I'm at on my mental health is like I just say I'm low. And I
Yeah.
think that that is like really true to how my experience has been with it, in the sense that like I never identified my mental health with the actual terms that like are being used with it. So like
Right.
depression is nothing that like I've typically identified myself having.
Like
Like
connected to, yeah.
yeah, like bipolarism, like you know what I mean? I think that's something that's really serious and is something that is diagnosed, you know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
for me, I think a lot of all those things and those traits in people are falling somewhere on a spectrum. So like, you know, I
Totally.
don't I don't know where I am, or I don't know what that looks like, and I've never been in a spot where I've sought out like help with it, you know? Like
Yeah.
I've also been able to cope with it, or find resources online, or just like talk to my friends
Yep.
with it, and like that kind of works some stuff out, you know. But I think that's why it's important for us to talk about it, and that's why we're doing it. And from my
Yep.
perspective is like I want to say that like I have been depressed, like I have had lows, I've had really low lows, but then I've also had like streaks of high for
The
like long
highest high. Yeah.
time, yeah. And I think that I still think it's like the way that I check my temperature is just like I'm high or I'm low, you know? Well, not
Yeah.
like literally high,
Yeah.
Denver shout out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think that normalizing some of the vocabulary is helpful, and I think for me normalizing depression as not you're at your bitter end. It's just like, you know, like I'm just not well right now. Like I'm under the
Yeah.
weather. I'm like depressed
Yep.
right now. And it doesn't mean that you're
Yeah.
incapable of, you know, going to work or like hanging out with friends, even though at times it can affect you in that way. But
Yeah.
like it's just a state that you're in. And I think
Yeah.
something else that's like been really important to me, or like that triggers me at times, is I think like we've talked about this, as Katie like knows just about everything in my life, but I think things that heavily affect me and my mental health are just like my physical fitness and the way that like I perceive my like body and the way that I look,
Yep.
and things like that. And for some reason, just the way that I've experienced life, that has put a huge like weight and burden on me. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I'm not doing well in that space, then I'm just not feeling well mentally. And
Across the
then
board. Yeah.
and then that also like triggers some sort of social anxiety, to where I have a huge habit of not wanting to present myself if I'm not at my best self. So
Mm-hmm.
like I can think of a bunch of times where I am like trying to regain my fitness, or I'm trying to gain like what I want and perceive of my body, and I'm just like
Yep.
working so hard to the point to where I'm exhausted, and then like I'll put it off because I'm like getting bored or tired of working out, and then it's like at night when I'm supposed to be hanging with people, or I already have plans, and then I don't go or I don't do it, or I'm just like not happy or not feeling like I look like the way that I
Yeah.
should, to where I'll just like hide from people and I won't
Yep.
see them. And like you're someone that's come to Denver, and like you didn't stay with me specifically, but like we
Yeah.
had plans to hang out, and I just like avoided you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like I didn't tell you that I was dealing with that, but like I just knew I was in a position where I wasn't my best self, so I just wanted to hide and like
Yeah.
not address it, or like I wasn't going to be fun, or you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
I had all these different things going on in my head to where I was just like, it's not worth it. Like it's not worth their time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be happy. So like, why do I need to go? You know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that you make like a pretty good point in that. And like going back to, you know, that time period, like I think that's before like I knew that like you were like struggling with anything potentially, like mentally or physically, right? So like I was obviously like super annoyed, and I was like, well, what the heck? Like I traveled here, and it's like, to be quite honest, and like the reason why I bring this up is because like I wasn't like, it didn't even like cross my mind to be like, hey, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it was just like, all right, that little bitch, you know what I mean? Like
which
doesn't
is fair,
want to
you
hang
know?
out with me. But it's like, it's actually kind of not like
Mm-hmm.
it is just because that's the way that like I feel like we've always kind of operated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think at the same time, it's a really great point to be like, hey, if someone says like, I can't hang out, or like, or even just like doesn't say anything, like I feel like the natural reaction is to be like, all right, cool. Like, thanks a whole lot. Like I waited for you, or like whatever that may be. And there's some sort of annoyance, but I think that it's almost like, it's a good point to be like, hey, like maybe
just to check in,
just be like, okay, like that's cool. No worries. Just want to make sure, like, is everything okay with you, or like something like that. You know what I mean?
I think if that were to happen, looking back, it would have. I think that I would have addressed it, or I would have shared something, but like I'm not entirely sure. I think.
Yeah, and like you never know, right? But then it opens up the opportunity for someone who maybe you don't know if they have an issue to be like, actually, no, like things aren't okay. You know what I mean?
And I almost, now that I think about it, like I almost try to give like a little bit of, not necessarily a like red flag and like a way that I'm like, hey, I need help, but it's more of just like, I try to make it very clear that I'm not doing shit if we're not hanging out. Like, it's not like I'm like going to a better option, and I'm not trying to make an excuse. It's just like, oh no, like actually my friend is throwing a surprise party for the cat, or, you know, I don't know, that I accidentally committed to a long time ago. It's just like, hey, like I'm really not doing anything if I'm not hanging out with you, you know? So I don't know. And I don't know how I like typically say it or how it's typically perceived, you know, but that's just kind of the way that I've been for a long time, a long time.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think that's like something I actually have never really thought of. And like, it's a good thing to kind of think of, because I feel like I am very big on the whole idea of like, check on your friends, check on all of your friends, not just the friends who like, you know, in that moment are going through something, but like there are times where it's like, I'll say I write like a blog post, right? And like in that blog post, I am like, I'm the happiest I've been in a really long time, right? But like, just because I say that and then I hit send, like I may have like a big wave of depression come over me, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh wait, no, I'm actually not okay. Like I don't know the amount of times in my mental health journey that I have been like, wow, this is the happiest I've been in like 2 years or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then like 2 months later, I'm saying the same thing again. It's like, that's how like on and off it is for me. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And like
Yeah.
how, like, it could just be that I'm like experiencing like a super high at that moment. And then, you know, right around the corner is like a low. So it's, I, my point was not just check on the people who you know have mental health problems, but more like literally everyone. I think that
Mm-hmm.
kind of how we're having this conversation, just like normalizing, like literally just asking your friends if they're okay.
Yeah, I think it's
Um,
super, super helpful. And I think that it's something that really has happened to me more frequently over the last like year. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that it was something that either that's my fault or my friend's fault or just something that like publicly was like, addressed or just like, hey, this is
yeah,
like your tool. This is like the way you should try to navigate that. And I think something that like we've achieved and hopefully like this conversation achieves for others is just like establishing that channel of communication with somebody, especially
yep,
before it actually is needed. You know what I mean? To where it's just
mm-hmm.
like, hey, like, how you doing? How you feeling? Or you know what I mean? Like,
Right,
hey, I know this happened, or I saw this, like what's going on, or are you feeling
yeah,
okay? Things like that. And I think that like Katie's taught me a lot in that space, and she's like really good at it. And like she's
thanks.
like yeah. So like I think it is really important, and it's cool to have like as someone who I feel like I have
Yeah,
it with like a couple of people. It's really
yeah.
nice.
Yeah, no, I think everyone should have that sort of relationship established. I think that another like kind of facet of that is like we need to be mindful, and this is something that I'm like actively working on and learning, because whenever I am in like a super depressive state, I get kind of selfish, and I think we
Mm-hmm.
all do in a way, where it's like, why me kind of thing, and like why aren't they checking on me, and like
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and like I think that's something that I'm working on, kind of, you know, trying to get better at, is like, hey, maybe if I like shot out a tweet that was like my smoke signal to like kind of be like, someone reach out to me almost. If someone doesn't, it could be because they can't take on your emotional pain at that moment, you know what I
Right.
mean? And that's something that like I don't think is easy to accept, but that I've been actively working on, is like, hey, just because like whoever doesn't text me like doesn't mean they don't care about me. They just like
Mm-hmm.
also might be going through something in that moment, and like they are trying to deal with their stuff, so they can't
Mm-hmm.
take like your I guess emotional baggage on as well at that moment. But just, you know, having some sort of like conversation where you say, hey, like I saw you tweeted this, like I am sorry that you're feeling that way, like I'm thinking about you, I'm having a really shitty day as well, so like I can't, like if I literally can't hear you vent, I can't hear you vent, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's fine. But I think that a lot of times people almost like maybe are worried to say that to someone who they know has mental health issues, because
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to seem like, hey, I really don't care or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. But it's like, I would rather someone say something along those lines, like, hey, I did see this. I'm sorry that it's going on. Like, let's talk about it, but like, I can't right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, me as someone who really goes through this shit all the time, like, that would make me happier. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, I think too, because of the way that it existed in the past, is like it was a little taboo. It was like a little bit of this, just like not everyone has it. Like only specific people have it. Like they're
yeah,
abnormal, to where it almost is also for like someone who may be trying to address it. still a little uncomfy with saying like, hey, is like calling this person out if like rude, you know? But I find it
Right.
entirely the opposite, you know? It's actually
Totally.
extremely helpful. But I do think that that at times exists where people may not know how to approach it, and there's that a
Yeah.
little bit of like pressure to perform, and people don't know what to say or like how to really like
Yeah.
relate to someone if they haven't experienced exactly that, to where it's just like, well, I'm not the
Yeah.
appropriate person to like handle that because I don't understand. And like, you know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of difficulties navigating that conversation.
Totally. But I think like being willing to say,
Like break that
hey,
ice. Mm-hmm.
like I want to be here for you so bad. I'm not going to be able to relate to what you're going through, but I do want to listen to you. Like sometimes that's all I want. Like
Uh-huh, for sure.
I don't necessarily always want someone who like when I'm venting about like a shitty boy, like I don't necessarily always want someone to be like, oh yeah, that like happened to me too and that like sucks so bad. Like sometimes I just want to be like, no, this is what happening to me right now, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm guilty of it. Like I will also, like, if someone's venting to me about something, I will be like so almost
Same.
sometimes
Yeah.
so wrapped up in my own mind trying to like rack a story to be able to like come back with, well, like, this happened to me too once and like
Mm-hmm.
blah 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 blah, that like I forget to listen.
Yep,
And it's
same.
like that's, I think, probably, in my opinion, well, one, why it's great to have like a therapist who's just like third party kind of person, but two, just an important reminder for all of us, like you don't always have to, like if someone's coming to you for like thoughts, advice, or like so
A
you
release.
think, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like you may think that someone's coming to you for advice, but they could just like really need to just like get something off their chest. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I just like feel like there's so much shit going on that I just want to like scream and have someone hear me. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
Versus like having that like relatability factor. Like
Yeah.
I don't always need that. Sometimes it is nice to be like, well, what would you do in this situation, or what have you done, kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. But I feel like more often than not, like especially in like mental health kind of situations, it's like that person just wants to know that they are being heard, and they
Mm-hmm.
just also want to know like that someone cares. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So I think that just like starting those conversations, reaching out to people, like even the people that seem like the happiest, like they may be like overcompensating. Like sometimes the people who are like out there posting the most selfies or whatever are trying, like myself included, are like overcompensating for something that is like missing in their own personal life, and they're trying to like
Suppress it in a
almost,
sense.
yeah, like almost like be like, well, like at least I like, I'm depressed as hell, but at least I get all these Instagram likes, or you know what I mean, like something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And it's like you kind of never really know, like I mean
It's
sometimes
like
it is.
you get affirmed that everything's okay, and then typically people
Yep.
like that have a more aggressive drop, which is why it's important to like, you know, have something
Totally.
more regular with the people that you communicate with.
Totally. And I think just like what I would say, like people can maybe take from this convo is like just shoot a text to a friend that you're like, shoot, I haven't like reached out to them in a while. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And just be like, hey, like, was just thinking about you. Like, I hope things are well. How are you doing? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or like maybe there is the person that you're like, you know what? I saw that tweet the other day and that was kind of weird. And like, they may think it's strange because we're not that close if I reach out to them, but I'm going to just do it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you ever kind of like have a first thought of like maybe I should reach out to this person, in my opinion you should. Like there's, if you go through my DMs right now, the amount of people that like I have DM'd, just because I saw a tweet that I'm like, if I tweeted this, this is what it would mean for me. So it
Mm-hmm.
brings up some sort of concern. So I just like pop in, and I will even be like, hey, I don't know if this is weird. Like, if you think this is weird, I'm sorry. But like, when I say this, like, I'm usually super upset. So I just want to like check
Make
in, see
sure.
if you're okay. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean?
I think something that's helped me that I would specifically want to challenge is like whenever you do that to like if you haven't already to like say the words mental health or be extremely clear about it because
Mm-hmm.
we have like we have like
Instead of dancing
numbed
around it.
well we've numbed how are you doing because that's what we say in public or that's what we say when we meet someone or you know
Yeah.
like and it's just like the auto response is good the auto response is like you know can't complain like good
Yeah.
because it's just like this is not really an in-depth conversation this is just like a polite thing to do
Totally.
so like I think if
Yeah.
you're hitting up one of your friends that you can achieve like a more in-depth
Mental
conversation
health
like
check.
yeah you know what I mean to where it's
Literally.
very clear like what's going on with that just to
Yep.
not get the auto
Yeah.
response
Yeah. So it's not just like, I'm good, thanks, like, bye. Yeah. I
yeah
think that's, I mean, when I do say I DM like a random person, I make it very clear, like, when I say things like this, I'm feeling low. So I wanted to make
mm-hmm.
sure, like, do you like, I'm here to listen, even if this is weird. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
for sure.
and I think just like, I don't know, in my opinion, like, don't just limit it to the people who you're comfortable with. Maybe start out that way if you're not in a position where you're like, oh my god, I'm ready to just go like DM Katie if you don't know me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, one, I hope like anyone who's listening, if you ever do want to talk to someone about mental health, I'm happy to chat about it. Like, if you'd like to know my experiences, or if you just need like some quick coping mechanism ideas, like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm nowhere near as great as a professional by any means, but like, I've learned a good amount, I feel like, over
Mm-hmm.
the years. But yeah, I think just like, if this is just the start for you and you're looking for somewhere to start, like, try it out with someone who you're like one of your best friends. You know what I mean? Like, a comfort space. And then
Mm-hmm.
as you kind of like expand and expand and expand, like, hopefully you can get to the point too where it's like you see a concerning tweet or you see a concerning like Instagram story, something like that, where you're like, like, that seems off. I'm just gonna like DM them and say what's up, like, personally. And maybe it's because like I'm constantly going through it. Like, I would never think it's like weird that someone cared enough to send a message to me. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, even if I am like, because sometimes the people will respond to me and be like, oh yeah, I'm totally good, blah, blah, blah. Like, I was just like, it's song lyrics or something like that.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, like, you know what I mean? Like, I would never leave that conversation and be like, what the hell? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I
Same.
mean? I would leave it more like, hey, at least like someone cares enough to just be
Yeah.
like, hey, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
For
I
sure.
think just like overall, I really wanted to do this episode, and I know you did as well, just because
Mm-hmm.
like I think there's a lot going on right now in the world, obviously, and we don't always take a whole lot of time to really sit down and like address mental health and like take the time for ourselves, because we're also fast paced, right? And like concerned with like this, that, and the other, that we don't take the time to like really sit down and be like, hey, how am I doing? And also for people who are experiencing this for the first time, like, just to know, like, don't compare yourself to the people that you know, like the celebrities or like me, who goes out and writes these like long ass like blog posts about like all the details, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm just incredibly open about it because I'm like, I would love to help someone. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? But just because like I go through and like share all those details doesn't mean that I think that like I have like the hardest experience, or like sometimes like I am feeling pretty good and I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not depressed anymore. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
and then it comes back in like some sort of scale. So I think if you're feeling, as Dakota would say, like low, just take a little time to like do a spot check with yourself even, and just be like, okay, is this, something that I should be concerned about? And I think too, as you were kind of saying, like, you can look up like YouTube videos, like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
for sure. With this episode, like what I want to try to achieve is like for people who may have experiences like myself or like yours or whatever the spectrum looks like, to try to start identifying it internally more. And I think that will just be helpful. And then secondly, like taking action on that, whether you have your own coping mechanisms or sharing or having conversations with others, because I think that that is extremely, extremely helpful. And I think that like, that's something that's definitely helped me. And I know it's helped you, Katie. And then like, if you don't have that yet, or you're not really sure how, or you just like want to talk to one of us and you relate to one of us, like we're here,
reach
you know?
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like seriously, reach out. I would love to have a chat about mental health. It's in my opinion, one of the most important things we've got. So we've got to like start having bigger conversations about it. And as we said, kind of like normalizing talking about it, and like being able to identify like, okay, hey, things aren't great right now.
Because at the end of the day, it's damaging us more frequently than probably like your physical health.
Exactly. Totally. Yeah, you know? I agree. 100%. Well, I hope that you all kind of took something from this, or, maybe you relate to it, and that's awesome. Definitely share this with someone if you think that they may need some further insight, or maybe they can, that they can relate. And so hopefully this is helpful to them as well. I think this is, I don't know, just like a really good conversation to have. And even if it's just sending, our podcast off, like, even as much as I love to just like plug the pod, you know what I mean? Like, I don't mean this in like the, like, oh, like, let's get us
clout way.
Like, yeah, I don't mean it in that way. I just mean like, it could be like you're in. I'm just saying, hey, like, I listened to this. Like, I thought it was great. Hopefully you thought it was great. You know what I mean? But like, now I'm just like sounding stupid. But no, I mean,
we get the point though.
If you think that this could be helpful to someone else, definitely take the time to share it with them. And as Dakota mentioned, like, reach out to us if you want to continue the conversation, and, also continue it with people in your life or people on your timelines. So that's all I got. Have a good one.
Stay healthy, everybody.